take care of others. We understand that. We understand that our time is also something that we have to invest in others and share of our time and of our energies to help others. But what happens if it's not about a material sacrifice, but if it's about a spiritual sacrifice to give up something spiritually in your life? Is that something that is condoned? Is that something we should do? Is that admirable? Again, to give up your material welfare for someone else, that, we get. You understand that? But our spiritual welfare, that's not so clear. Is that so evident? So today we're going to discuss that. But before we get there, let's start with the Parsha. And based on the Parsha, hopefully we'll use that as a springboard for some of the conversation in this area. Are we ready? Here we go. Okay. So we have the very beginning of Parshah Shelach in front of us. Oops, there we go. And God spoke to Moshe saying, Shlach lecha anashim, send out for yourself men who will scout the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel. You shall send one man each for his father's tribe. Each one shall be a chieftain in their midst. So Moshe sent them from the desert of Paran by the word of God. All of them are men of distinction. They were the heads of the children of Israel. That's how our Parsha begins. 12 selected men of stature, as the verse says, that they're men of stature and reputation. Full of optimism that they're going to scout out the land to find out the easiest way to ultimately conquer the land. But of course, as we know the story, they said, forget it. It's an impossible land. There's no way that we can conquer it. And they scared the people as a result. Text number 1b, they returned from scouting the land, and at the end of 40 days, they went and they came to Moshe and to Aaron and all the congregation of the children of Israel in the desert of Paran to Kadesh. They brought them back a report as well as to the entire congregation, and they showed them the fruit of the land. They told them and said, we came to the land that you sent us, and it is flowing with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who inhabit the land are mighty, and the cities are extremely huge and fortified. And there we saw even the offspring of the giant. So, continues. The Amalekites dwell in the south of the land, while the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountainous region. The Canaanites dwell on the coast and alongside the Jordan. Caleb silenced the people to hear from Moshe, and he said, we can surely go up and take possession of it, for we can indeed overcome it. But the men who went up with him said, we are unable to go up against the people, for they are stronger than us. They spread an evil report about the land that they had scouted, telling the children of Israel, the land we passed through to explore is a land that consumes its inhabitants, and all of the people we saw in it are men of stature. So Rashi explains about this negativity of theirs, being very ungrateful and complaining. So example, they said that they saw fruit. The fruit was, the grapes were so big that it took 8 men to carry it on poles to bring it back. 2 others carried a giant fig and a giant pomegranate. So instead of recognizing the miracle of the land and the unique quality of the land, they say that the land is strange. That's what the verse says, and Rashi explains. They carried it on a pole between two people. From the implication of carried it on a pole, do I not know that it was carried by two? So what does between two tell us? The answer is with two poles. How was it done? 8 of them took a cluster of grapes, one took a fig, one took a pomegranate. Joshua and Caleb did not take anything, for the intention of the others was to present a slanderous report, namely, just as its fruit is strange, so is its people. So that's one example of, rather than seeing the miracle of the land, that, this is a land that is going to produce for us, unbelievable crops, they see in it the strangeness of it. Another example, when they came, they noticed there was a lot of funerals that were going on. A lot of Canaanites were dying. And God provided this, or made this occur, in order that the spies who were coming to the land would not be noticed, because the people were so engaged with taking care of their loved ones that had passed away. This was a generous gesture of God Almighty. And what did they say? Oh, the land, it consumes its inhabitants. Rashi explains, consumes its inhabitants. Whenever we passed, we found them burying dead. The Holy Blessed be He intended this for good, to keep them occupied with their mourning, so they should not notice them, the spies. But they turned it around, right? So, of course, as a result, this was not encouraging for the people. And the people cried out to God, better us return to Egypt. Who needs this? Now, Yeshua and Caleb were 2 of the 12 spies that were righteous, and they tried to calm down the people, but it was too late. It was too late. Already the message created havoc amongst the Jewish people. And as a result, we all know the story, a decree ensued that the 10 spies themselves would die an ugly death, when the rest of the nation, they would die in the 40 years in the desert. Why? Because they lost the faith in God, so therefore they lost the merit to go up to the land. Now, what's the core sin here? What is the core sin that they had done?
They didn't have faith in God that He take them safely to Israel after He split the sea and made the plagues and did all the good things for them. They didn't trust God to help them.
Right. Seemingly, they didn't trust. Exactly. But what's the core sin? To trust God, where is that? Where's that placed? In your heart, right? In your heart, you trust God. But that's not really what they're, that is a sin, absolutely. Absolutely, Lily, that's a sin. However, that's not the sin that they're punished for. What are they punished for? Anybody? They spoke Lashon Hara. They spoke ill of the land, negative speech. They manipulated the facts to create a story of hopelessness. That way it would turn away the people from wanting to go up to the land, right? Is that clear? That's the core point. Now, for example, Lily, what you mentioned about, losing faith, it's, if you lose faith and you say nothing, okay, that's still something that needs to be dealt with. But if you didn't say anything and it was just in your heart, then what would have happened? The Jewish people wouldn't have lost faith themselves. But because they spoke what they spoke ill about the land. They spoke Lashon Hara. As a result of the Lashon Hara, they caused the entire Jewish people to lose faith and also have a desire to go back to Egypt rather than go to the land. Right? Is that clear? Okay. Now, we spoken previously, and we speak again, about juxtaposition. Last week we spoke about it in the Parsha, the week before. And this week we speak about the juxtaposition of the story of the spies and the end of last week's Parsha, which is the story of Miriam, that they are one right after the other. And both are a theme of Lashon Hara. Miriam was punished because of what she did last week, speaking against her brother Moshe. And as Rashi explains, the spies saw this and they didn't learn from Miriam not to speak ill. Rashi, this week's Parsha, send for yourself men. Why is the section dealing with the spies juxtaposed with the section dealing with Miriam? Because she was punished for the matters of slander, for speaking against her brother, and these wicked people witnessed it but did not learn the lesson. Is that clear? Any questions on this before we move on? Does anybody have a difficulty with this?
I thought
Leah, go ahead, Leah.
I thought Miriam only spoke to her brothers about the Cushite or whatever with Moses. I didn't think that she spoke to the whole clan of Israel.
She didn't. You're right, but it was still Lashon Hara.
Right, but all of Israel didn't know what she did and how she did and whatever. They didn't hear her say anything. They didn't know what she
did. So therefore, what's your question? Or what's your point?
So you said they learned from what she did. They should not done it. They should not said Lashon Hara, but they didn't really know what she did.
They didn't learn properly from her. She spoke Lashon Hara against her brother, right? Mixing into his private affairs with his relationship with his wife, right? She got punished for it. How did she get punished? She got saras, leprosy, right, on her skin as a result. She had to stay in isolation and quarantine. We spoke about it this Shabbos in Shul here for 7 days as a result. And because that's the idea of leprosy, speaking ill about another. So back in the day, not today, but back in the day, it could happen that you would get leprosy. She got leprosy, speaking ill. Now, all the nation knew that. The whole nation waited for her 7 days. So, kind of a lesson to learn that, hey, look what happens when you speak ill, right? They didn't pick up the message. They didn't get the memo, right? They didn't get the memo. They didn't learn. That's what Rashi is saying. But does anybody have a difficulty with this? Anybody have a challenge with this? Is there something that might bother you about this point?
What I have a question about, Rabbi, is, I thought the concept of Lashon Hara was only against speaking ill about individuals, about people. But here we have a concept of Lashon Hara against the land itself. So how could we extrapolate that idea further? Lashon Hara is speaking ill against what? Whom? What are the things that one can speak Lashon Hara against?
Very good. Excellent question. So in general, we would say Lashon Hara is speaking about an individual or individuals, right? That's true. I guess the land is a holy land, and there's something special about it. That it's. In other words, in the broader sense of slander, right? So it's a slanderous remark about the land that is meant to be ultimately the holy land. So it's a slanderous remark about the land. So in that regard, that's the term. Let me just see Rashi. she spoke slanderous, and they're speaking slanderous. That's the basic, In other words, negative speech, right, isn't, I guess from this, what we get out of it, and, very good point, Denny, is that it just doesn't mean against the person. It's negative speech, period. And from negative speech, speaking in a slanderous manner, there are consequences as a result, as in, as in this story here, right? So that's what it is. Slanderous. So yeah, that's what it is. So no one else has but that was a very good question. Anybody else have a question? Anybody have an issue over here? Anybody have a problem with what we just learned? Liba.
Rabbi, I just have a quick question. I thought that there was an issue of what Moses and what Moshe had asked them to do, and they didn't follow it. Instead, they spied instead of telling the truth about the land. Was there some kind of mix-up about what they were truly being asked of and what they came back and reported?
So they were asked to scout the land and just give the excellent question, by the way, Liba. Come back with information on how to best conquer the land. Right? That's what they were requested. They weren't not asked to come and give a critique about the land. Can we do it? Can we not do it? That was not a question. That was a given. We're going to do it, right? How do we know we're going to do it? Because God says we're going to do it, so we're going to do it. They came back and they went beyond what they were supposed to do. Just give us the facts on how, where are they fortified strongly, so then we know, we got to go fight from this side rather than that side. We're going to take them from the south rather than from the north, for example, because we know how they are fortified, and therefore we'll know the best way to conquer. So it was just give the facts so that way we know the best way to conquer. What they did was, and maybe this is the beginning of yellow journalism. I think this is it. Actually, the beginning of yellow journalism, right? Fake news. This is it. What is the fake news? Is you're giving your slant on it. They weren't asked for their slant. There was a slant given already. And what's the slant? What's the slant? We're going to conquer the land. Just the question is how. That's the only question. Okay, Andrew, you had a question.
Yeah, it always bothered me. Why weren't we punished in theory for even requesting that we be permitted to send spies down? Just like when we got to the waters and when there were 4 questions as to what they should do, or issues as to how they should address the issue. And God said, the Midrash was, I didn't tell you to stop, I just told you to go. So here we were told to enter the land. Why were we even dealing with sending spies down other than just going into the land without even sending spies down? I mean, the people said, we want to go investigate. God didn't tell you to investigate. He said, I'm sending you there. That's your land.
Right. So that's a beautiful question. The Rebbe asks that, and it's a lengthy explanation. And in brief, I'm going to give, in very brief, it really is it's a whole teaching unto its own. But in brief, you see that God commanded over here, Shlach lecha. I mean, I should say, Shlach lecha, send if you want, right? It's in other words, I'm not, as Rashi says, I am allowing you to send, you're not commanded to send, right? The point of this was in order to bring, in order that the people will know best on how to fight and in the land. So therefore the scouts were sent. So to know the best way, the lay of the land, right? So yes, initially God says, I'm giving you the land, so have trust. But the people were, not so, eager just to trust. So God said, okay, I'll go and find out. That's one level. There's more levels to that, but we're going to leave it at that right now. Okay, there's more deeper understanding of this incident over here, but it's that's on a simplistic level. Okay, so okay, no one is asking this question, so I guess I'm left to ask it. And the question is, how do you compare the two stories exactly? Remember, the Torah is juxtaposing one story with another, right? Now, technically, both are about Lashon Hara. Both are about speaking ill in a negative manner, no doubt, right? However, the spies lose their life for this. The rest of the Jewish people, which was the consequence of what they did, right, of their Lashon Hara, die out in the desert. This was a big thing, right? But Miriam, was she not a righteous person before? Was she not a righteous person after? Absolutely. Even though it was, God says this was not your place, she's a righteous person. And her, nuanced Lashon Hara, speaking ill about her brother, like Lily, like you mentioned, it was only to Aaron, and it was only out of concern, right? It wasn't in order to defame him. It wasn't in order to go against God, right? But even that was slight. It was off, as God says, "Hey, he's my most trusty servant," right? He's doing what he's supposed to be doing, and so and so much so that she is a holy person that the entire 2.5 million Jews that are in the desert wait for her 7 days to finish her quarantine, and then they continue the travel, right? So why is Torah juxtaposing these two actions when Miriam is a holy person? The spies are not. They're evil in the. I mean, they started off people of stature. They started off as good people, but they had an agenda, and that agenda unraveled, and not a good thing came out of it. Let's see what the Rebbe says on this. Asking this question. When we read the two passages, one after the other, the story of Miriam and the story of the spies, both are about Lashon Hara. One could possibly make a terrible mistake in thinking Miriam and the spies can be placed in the same category, God forbid. Or at least that the two stories are similar to one another, seemingly to avoid such a misunderstanding and to make clear that the spies were not on Miriam's spiritual level at all. The Torah ought to have placed these two stories apart from one another and place some other passages in between them. Is that clear? In other words, we're besmirching a bit Miriam's reputation by putting them next to each other. As if, Lashon Hara here, Lashon Hara over here. There's worlds apart between them. Yes, there's a common thread, but why would Torah bring them together? And the question goes even further. In Torah law, there's an interesting thing that a person needs to avoid improper behavior if it's in an instance where it's only appearing to be inappropriate behavior. Not that in fact it is. In fact, it wasn't inappropriate, but it might appear to be inappropriate. Even such a thing we need to be careful with. A classic example is in the times of the Holy Temple, there were communal funds that they used to purchase supplies. And they had 3 large bins in the temple treasury. So you couldn't go just and take monies, to purchase things, the people who were responsible for that, there was a protocol to verify that no funds were, well, not pocketed so much, but for transparency's sake, that no one should be suspect that they were taking money and using it for themselves. So the Mishnah tells us about these 3 baskets that you have to be very careful that the way the monies were taken from there for the needs of the service in the Holy Temple was in a way that there was no chance that someone even think that maybe these funds were being used for other reasons, personal reasons or the like. Why? Because you need to find favor and good understanding in the eyes of God and man, meaning that you need to be careful on how people perceive things. The story of the previous generation, the Ger Rebbe of blessed memory, called him one of his Hasidim, and he said, "As mizokt wegen dir, as they say about you, that you were with such and such a woman." And he says, "Rebbe, God forbid, it's not true." So he says to him, "I didn't say you were with somebody. I say they say about you. The very fact that it's being said, that itself is bad enough." In other words, part of the problem today with sexual harassment and all these issues that go in the workplace and so on, a person needs to be so clean that no one could say it even about you, let alone that it was about you. Perception is something that we need to be concerned with in Jewish law. So, for example, to go into a non-kosher restaurant, not so simple, because someone might think, well, first of all, someone might think, oh, maybe this is a kosher restaurant. Or someone might think that, oh, what are you doing in a non-kosher restaurant, right? Whatever the case may be. Welcome, Sydney. Actually, I want to mention that tonight's learning is in honor of Sydney's father, whose yahrzeit is today. And I'm sorry, Sydney, I meant to call you to remind you, but I said Kaddish for him, just to let you know. And as actually is in honor of my mechutin, who every Sunday our classes are in honor of him, as it's sponsored by my daughter-in-law and son, Rabbi Shmari Katzen of blessed memory. So welcome. In any case, so question of being of the idea of perception, that it's only perceived as such, but in fact it isn't as such. So here we're talking about Miriam, even if it's just a perception that some novice learner will learn the Torah portion and see that, oh, she spoke Lashon Hara and they spoke Lashon Hara, and put them on the same level, even though in fact that they're not. But the very fact that the Torah is comparing them, how could you do that? How could you do that for her dignity? How could you do that for her sake? That that there should be a thought, that there'd be such a suspicion about her, that she's somewhat comparable to the spies. Is that question clear? Okay. So we're going to get back to that later. Okay, just hold that under your hat. And if you're not wearing a hat, then all right, there you go. Hold on to it. So we asked a question earlier. What was the question earlier? Are you allowed to compromise your personal level of observance and commitment to God on a personal level for the sake of another, to help them? Now, of course, that's a very wide and open-ended question, right? You know, so you can always answer as, you know, every good Jewish answer, well, it depends, right? The answer is yes and no, no and yes. But let's go into this, and we're going to see from a Jewish perspective this concept, and bringing up some halachic issues that the Talmud speaks about, and how they perceive it. And we're going to see actually a contradiction. And from that contradiction, how we can see from the contradiction a pshara, forgetting my English words today, resolution in that contradiction. Okay, we're going to give two examples. So there's a biblical prohibition of cooking and baking on Shabbos, right? Clear. What if Reuven took raw challah on Shabbos that was not baked yet, and put it into a hot oven on Shabbos, right? Now, the Talmud speaks about this. So back in the day, the way they made they baked is the kind of ovens they had is that you put the challah on the side of the oven. It would stick, the whole art on how it would stick to the side of the oven, the inside wall, and heat it up over there, right? And then there was a special method on how you would remove it. Now, putting in the challah on Shabbos to bake, of course, is a biblical prohibition. How about taking it out? Taking it out, you're not baking, right? So taking it out is a rabbinic prohibition, not biblical, right? Because you're not doing any baking and taking it out, right? But since it's considered a deliberate and precise act, so the rabbi said, no, such a thing you can't do, right? Now, this Reuven who put it into the oven, right? It's a transgression. However, when does it really become a transgression? The moment he puts it in, or the moment it bakes, which might take 20 minutes, let's say. What happens in the interim of putting it in? He says, oh my gosh, tshuva, gotta repent, this is wrong, I shouldn't do this. Can he now go and take it out? Now, taking it out, what did we just say? Is a rabbinic transgression. However, if he were to let it continue to bake, it will become a biblical transgression. So the question the Talmud asks, can Reuven now open up the oven, take out the bread while it's still raw, or somewhat raw, not baked enough, whatever amount, there's a certain amount, and therefore transgress a rabbinic law, but be released from the transgression of a biblical law? So what do you think the halacha is? Sorry to make you work so hard at this, at this late hour in the evening. Not so late, but No? What do you think?
This sounds like a Talmudic question.
This isn't the Talmud. This is a question in the Talmud. This is discussed. So I'm asking my Talmudic scholars over here. Ahuva, go ahead.
I have no idea what the answer is, but it sounds like taking advantage of loopholes. And
I don't know if it's why is it a loophole?
Is there something about rabbinic laws are not as severe? If you break a rabbinic law, it's not as severe as breaking a biblical law? Maybe that's an assumption I'm making, but
no, absolutely. Of course. Biblical law is much more stringent than the rabbinic law. So therefore, can you break the rabbinic law in order to, because by the way, what's the punishment that a person could possibly get for the biblical law? It could be a death sentence for transgressing Shabbos if there are two witnesses that forewarned you before the act, and you're fully aware that what you're doing. So it's pretty severe. I mean, it's very unlikely to be that severe, but it just shows you how severe the transgression is, right? Very unlikely, that would happen. But the point is that that's what could happen. Rabbinic law, that would not happen, right? So the law is that indeed, that the sages tell us, transgress that rabbinic law in order to save you from that biblical law, that you shouldn't transgress it, right? Because if it didn't bake, then you didn't transgress the law of Shabbos of baking, right? Is that clear? Yeah. Any questions on that?
They didn't transgress because they did teshuvah in the 20 minutes?
Yeah. It's irrelevant what they did. It's irrelevant what they did. This is halacha. You need to know the hypothetical, in other words, whether they did tshuva, didn't do tshuva. The point is, what's the law? Are you allowed to? So, for example, if your friend Ruvain did this, now you need to know, hey, maybe you have to tell him, hey, Ruvain, take out the bread, because this way you won't transgress the biblical law of Shabbos. Whatever, whether the person did tshuva, didn't do tshuva, it's what the law is. Okay, is that clear, Ahuva? Yeah.
So he's still not punished because he put it in. He won't be breaking it because he's taking it out.
He took it out before baked. The law is that being baked is what you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, right? We'll see. It's a little complicated, but that's what it is right now. Okay, that's what the law is. Now, what happens if Ruvain put it in, and he's nowhere to be found, and Shimon, his friend, now, look what my friend Ruvain did. Can he go and open up the door and take out that bread in order to save him from what could be a dire consequence in Jewish law? You follow the question? Am I getting sleepy heads over here tonight? What's going on? Let's focus. Let's pay attention. Put on your Talmudic caps. I need you all to be with me. Focus, focus, focus. This is really amazing stuff.
Shimon should not do anything.
He should not do anything.
He should not do anything.
Because
you need two witnesses in order to.
No, one second. Remember, Shimon, if he were to take it out, he would only be breaking a rabbinic law, not a biblical law, because he didn't put it into bake. He's only going to take it out.
Yeah, but he's doing work if he takes it out. There was a way of the way that they took it out back then. Maybe the ovens were different, and it was considered work, even taking it out.
No. I'm explaining to you that it's only rabbinic. Don't think about your oven today. You put on the light because of it, or you did whatever, right? No. I'm talking about this Talmudic ovens. Talmudic ovens, not General Electric ovens. Okay.
So Shimon would be breaking a rabbinic law.
But can he do it in order to save his friend Ruvain, who can't be found? And if you're going to wait another 5 minutes, it's going to bake, and it's going to be him transgressing a biblical law. Hey, come on, have a heart.
Well, he should consult his Rav.
Well, no, this is a question in the Talmud. That's who we're consulting. Let's go to the Talmud. This is the Talmud. So the Talmud tells us in the Tractate of Shabbos, Parshah Shelach said that they permitted someone else to remove the bread to save the individual from transgression. So Parshah Shelach says it's permitted. That was his opinion. Rav Sheshes strongly objected to this, but Rav Sheshes came back and said, no, wrong. Do we tell a person sin so that another will benefit? Emphasis added. Rather, as Rabbi Bar Abaya said, if one stuck bread to the oven, the rabbis permitted him, but not someone else, to remove it, thus avoiding a more serious transgression that would incur, or could incur, not would, the death penalty. So this is a famous line in rabbinic law. What's the famous law? Do we tell a person to sin so another person should benefit? We don't. We don't. So the halacha is, as Denise said, Shimon does not do it. Shimon does not sin because even though it's only a rabbinic sin, but it's a sin, nonetheless. We don't tell him to do that in order to save Reuven from his sin. Clear? Okay. Not so clear, because now we have another case. Please put on your Talmud caps and please focus. Okay. As we see, nothing's black and white. Now, back in the day, tithing. What was tithing? Not today, like 10% that you have to give of your charity, of your net earnings to charity. Back in the day, it was taken from your produce, and you had to give it to the Levites. That was what tithing was, right? In the Holy Land. This Shabbos, we had a kiddush, beautiful kiddush, and one of the sponsors says, I want to bring oranges. So he says, okay, no problem, but just don't bring oranges from Israel. Even though we love them, Jaffa oranges, but Jaffa oranges that are sent to America, they don't tithe them. They don't tithe them. And they need to be, it's only rabbinic law today, right? It's only rabbinic law today. But back in the day, it was a biblical law. So, you got to be careful of produce. If you have to have a hechsher, and when you're getting just oranges, loose oranges, there's no hechsher. You need a rabbinic authority to give a hechsher on the food from Israel. That way you know that the tithing was taken from it as needed. So biblical obligation in the times of the Holy Temple that you need to tithe, right? So the Talmud speaks about a case of a pious person. Pious person means someone who you can trust that they tithe. In Talmudic terminology, that's called a chaver, a friend. Where chaver means friend, right? And someone who's trustworthy. That's what a real friend really is, right? Someone you can trust. But that's the term it's used, right? So they know the laws and they do it properly, and so on. There's no worry about taking, you can assume that they have done this, right? Talmud poses the following question. What if this chaver sends a worker who's a non-chaver, in other words, not someone who you can fully trust, to take tithes, right? And he sends him into his orchard and he says, collect some fruit, which he will sell on the market. Can we assume that the produce has been tithed? That's the question Talmud asks. Now, obviously, if you can go and ask and so on, but we're talking about where, it's being sold and you know that it's coming from this person, but it is his worker, can we assume? But the story goes further. So the Talmud says we can rely on the produce to be tithed for the following reason. Because tithing can be separated, if it wasn't separated from that particular food that was being sold, right? It can be tithed from other foods. So even though the chaver, the pious one, is not going to market, he's sending his worker for him, who's a non-chaver, non-pious person. But we can assume, because he is a pious person, that he took tithing. He didn't take tithing from that because that was in the field and it didn't come to him. It went straight to the market. So where did he take the tithing? From other goods, from other fruits. similar fruits, but not the same fruits, right? So he went and told him to get the Jaffa oranges, go to the market, go sell them. And he went straight. This non-chaver didn't do it, but we can assume, because he's a pious person, that he had other Jaffa oranges in his home, and he took from their tithes, set it aside, and therefore discharging the obligation on the produce in question. Is that clear? But there's a problem here. And what's the problem? The halacha is that you're not allowed to take, if I have this batch of food that needs to be tithed, I need to take from this batch. I can't take from another batch. Or you're not supposed to do that, at least, right? Kind of breaking the rules. So the rabbis say to avoid someone from accidentally eating from untithed food, which is much more serious than taking it from other produce, it's okay to do that. Let's look at the Talmud inside. Rabbi reasoned it is preferable for a chaver to commit a minor offense, separating tithes in a wrong fashion, right, from other foods, not from the batch of food that now was taken from the fields, right, but another batch that was already in the house. Why? So that another person not unwittingly commit a graver offense eating untithed produce. Is that clear? Again, let me repeat it to make sure we have clarity over here. In this scenario, when do you take tithes? After you've taken from the field the produce. But he sent the non-chaver worker to the field. He doesn't know how to do it. He's not going to do it. But he told him to take and go to market. A pious person would never do that without taking tithes. So what did he do? He took tithes on other produce. So therefore, this now has been tithed and can be sold, and it's not a problem. But that's a minor offense that he did. He transgressed a minor offense because it's not the appropriate way to do it. You're supposed to take from the produce that you just currently took from the field and take the tithing from there, not from some other place. But the rabbi said it's okay to do that. Why? Because what's worse? Doing it not in the appropriate fashion, the tithes, or that someone would eat from foods that tithes were not taken from? That's much greater offense. Much greater offense. Again, we have the same idea here, right? But from this one, what do we learn? In the other case, what did we learn? They are not allowed to transgress a minor offense to mitigate a more serious offense. In this instance, you can transgress a minor offense in order to mitigate a greater offense of people eating tithes, a food that was untithed. Did I lose you? We have a contradiction here. We have a contradiction.
Yes, Rabbi.
Yes.
Why would there be so much stringency on one and then the restriction is much less on the other? That I'm confused.
No, what we have here is a contradiction. What we have here is a contradiction. What's the contradiction? In the first instance, we say that you can't transgress a lesser stringency to save from a more severe law, right? A lesser transgression, we can't, right? In the case of the bread. In our case over here, we say, yeah, do transgress the lesser transgression in order that we'll prevent from a greater transgression. So there's a contradiction in the Talmud. So Taisvais, who if you, I don't have a Talmud here, but if you, Talmud, you have on the inner side of the page, you have the Talmud is in the middle. Rashi's commentary is on the inside of the page, and Taisvais is on the outside of the page. Taisvais, some of the grandchildren of Rashi actually, and so they, and there are several Taisvais. Taisvais means additional. The word Taisvais means just additional, but additional commentary. That's how they're known as. So they give they resolve the question over here in two different ways. One is that there's a key difference between the two instances. In the first case, why do we say you don't transgress the lesser law? Because the first person who transgressed was negligent. Someone is negligent, so you're not going to transgress in order to save that person. Right? In the second instance, there was no one negligent. The assumption would be that when these fruits go to market, right, the non-chaver is bringing it, right? The non-pious person is bringing it and selling it. But who is he selling it for? The chaver, for the pious person. He's not selling it on his own. He's selling it for him. So people are going to know. Oh, it's from chaver. It's from a reliable source. So obviously tithes were taken. They would assume that. But that might be so they would assume that. So therefore the sages say that that person's not negligent. They're assuming that it was taken. So therefore the sages say, if that's the case, you know what? Just to make sure that indeed they were taken, so the chaver could take from other produce, which is not an appropriate way to do it. The appropriate way is to take it from the produce that was just taken from the field and not produce that you already had, back at home. And you could take the tithes from there. So there's a distinction between the two. Is that clear? Oh my gosh, I realize got a lot left to go. Now, with this, we can explain the following. There was a famous case that came to the Rashba. Rashba lived in, I think, in the 1300s, if I remember correctly, of a woman that was kidnapped, Jewish woman. And she wasn't kidnapped to be killed or even for any sexual things, but to be lured away from her faith. And it happened on Shabbos. So the question came to the Rashba, can you profane Shabbos in order to get this woman back? Can you, go beyond the laws of the Tchum, which is the city limits, in order to help this individual? Now, if it was a question of life and death, there's no question that all laws of Shabbos are set aside in order to save a life. That's not an issue. But that's not what the issue here was at all. It wasn't a question of life and death, right? It was a question of spiritual danger, to be lured away from her faith. So maybe, it's okay to wait till after Shabbos.
It can be spiritual death, no?
Okay, but the question is, do you wait till after Shabbos or not? That's the question, right? In other words, spiritual death doesn't happen in an instance, right? Physical
They
death.
could take her to a
Physical
different
death.
city. They could take her to a different city. You won't be able to find her after Shabbos, maybe.
Right. Okay. Good point. So let's see how the Rashba dealt with this. So the Rashba was asked about a case of a man who was informed on Shabbos that his daughter had been forcibly taken from his home by a renegade Jew who intended to lead her away from her faith. Was it permissible to journey beyond the Tchum or to procure a seal from the government? Can we override the rules of Shabbos for the possibility of saving her, as we do for saving a life? He responded that the matter requires further study. So he went into our case over here that we just brought down of our two cases. So he says, if we differentiate between one who acted negligently and one who didn't, we can conclude, right? What was the case of acting negligently? The person who put the challah into the oven on Shabbos, that's negligent, right? But the case of the tithed fruit or produce, that there was nothing negligent there, right? And there it was permissible to transgress a lesser law in order to negate a transgression of a more severe law. So he says, therefore, it is permissible to violate the Shabbos laws to save her. And in fact, it is a mitzvah to do so. It would seem that it is permissible even to violate Torah prohibitions. Doing so would be considered a minor infraction when compared to the possibility of her abandoning her faith and never keeping Shabbos again. Yes, Lily, you're correct. Is that clear? That just bringing from halacha, you can see the distinction that we're making over here, right? Between, in other words, if she was negligent, then maybe it would be a different question. You know, then they wouldn't be able to use that. Although I'll be quite honest with you, it's not very clear because, like Lily, like you said, and which he does say, that it's a spiritual life that you're saving, and therefore, even Torah prohibitions that you can override in order that this person should not be taken away from the observance of Torah mitzvahs. So the truth is not 100% clear on that. But that's the distinction that he's making, right? Since there was no negligence on her part, therefore we have a responsibility to transgress Shabbos in order to save her. If there was a negligence, that's where I'm not exactly clear, because he seems to suggest, still saving. Now, I guess if there was negligence, meaning that person was, hey, part and parcel of this. So then, you're not, how are you, you're not taking someone away that'd been forcibly being taken away. They have done it themselves. So then maybe Shabbos you wouldn't violate because, they're part and party of it. Yeah, so it actually would make sense. And then you have to wait till after Shabbos. Right? Yeah, it kind of fits in. Okay, is that clear?
Yeah. In general, it seemed like the Rebbe seemed, and maybe not just the Rebbe, but to always kind of, what we think might constitute them being negligent may not really have been negligent. And
of course, absolutely correct.
Kind of always assume, and I don't know if assume's right, but you
right.
know that if they knew better, they wouldn't, and it wasn't really
Right. No, but you're absolutely correct. I want to give this proper context to this. We're talking about law, the application of the law. We saw the Rashba, how he just did that, right? In his ruling, right? And of course, it's based on every incident will be different, right? It's not with one stroke, across all, incidences of such a nature. You would take into consideration many things. And like you said, was it really negligence? Was it, the person doesn't know any better, and so on and so forth. 100% correct. That's how it would be handled by rabbinic authorities. What we're doing over here is just appreciating the principles that are involved in the decision, right? And in another case, it would be, you might throw into the mix another principle, and therefore you would get a different, conclusion as a result. But yeah, is that good? We're clear? So Tosfos gives a second reason, the difference between the two laws. Remember, when it comes to baking on Shabbos, right, you don't transgress. Meaning, Shimon doesn't transgress for Reuben. Reuben for himself does transgress, right? But not Shimon for Reuben. That's what we said, right? But in the case, and the reason that we gave before is because the person was negligent. In the second case, there's no negligence there. So therefore, you can transgress a lesser transgression in order to prevent a more serious transgression of people eating untithed food, right? Now, in the Tosfos, he brings a second explanation of why there's a distinction between the two. And he says as follows. In the first, in the oven, when you put in the bread, what you've done is an act of baking. But all you did was an act of putting it into the oven, right? The result, though, is independent of you. It's independent of you. The result is separate from you. Because the oven is what's baking it, not you, right? And it's a result of being in a time period in the oven. So what does that mean? The act of putting it in, Reuven does, but until it's baked, the actual malacha, the liability that's concerned over here, right, hasn't occurred. Therefore, if you can find a way to get the dough out of the oven, then we do that. That way he has no liability, which the liability would negligent. It could be, it depends on what kind of negligence it was. It could be bringing a sin offering if you just did it, you didn't realize it was Shabbos, right? Or if you did it purposefully, then it could be worse than that, right? So according to this explanation, the Torah permits a minor offense. In other words, to save a person from committing a more severe offense, the Torah does not permit committing a minor offense to save a person from a consequence of a sinful act. Right? Because there's the act and the consequence of the act. So only in the instance where can I not save somebody is that they did an act and there's a consequence of that act, which is the liability. That the consequence is that it stays in the oven and it bakes, and now there's a liability that you either have to bring in a sin offering, or it could be worse than that if you did it intentionally, right? So in that kind of instance, I'm not permitted to help somebody, right? But in the case of chaver, where the improperly produced, the tithe is before, it's only a potential of sin. There's no act yet that occurred. As the act of sin was done by putting it into the oven, right? But the consequence of that act is only once it gets baked. In that instance, I can't save a person. But in an instance where there's only a potential for sin, in the case of tithing, then I can save. Then I can save the situation. Because no one bought the produce yet. So since no one bought the produce yet, there's no sin that a person would be liable for of eating untithed foods. Follow the distinction? Let me repeat again. In the case of the oven, the sin is in the act of putting it into the oven, right? That's the act of sin. Are you liable at that moment? No, it hadn't been baked yet. Oh, grab it out. You're okay, right? Grab it out, you're okay. So you yourself could do that. Someone else can do it because I can't save someone from the consequence of their act. That's only the consequence of their act. I can't save them from that. But in the case of tithing, there was no sinful act yet. The sinful act would be if someone bought the food and ate it without the tithes being taken. That I can save a person from. Because it's only a potential of sin that could be done with that produce. And therefore I can tithe from other foods to take away a potential that someone might sin. But in the case of the oven, the sin was done. You put it into the oven. I can't save you from the consequence. I can save you from sin. I can't save you from consequence of sin. Which that itself is a powerful statement when you think about it. Is that clear, the distinction? Excellent. Phew.
Rob, I have a question.
Go ahead.
If you change the hypothetical or the story where the person was kidnapped, but let's say the person's intent was only to kidnap them for 24 hours and keep them away from Shabbos just that week, instead of this, the story was the understanding they would be kept away forever. If it was just going to be for 1 week and your choice was to have to go get that person to save them from not being on, celebrating Shabbos, and you have to get in your car and drive to do that, does that change the end result from if the person was going to be taken away forever?
I know, good question. I have to think about it. I'm not certain. If it was just like someone kidnapped somebody to party with them for that Shabbos, I mean, you need to know if there's a danger. Is there a danger? Is there a life-threatening danger?
No, assuming for whatever reason, the person said, you know what, this is nonsense. I want to make sure you don't celebrate it. I'm just going to take you away. You knew that the person, it was some relative you knew for some reason. And now, you had to decide.
Just to save them from that, you probably could not transgress Shabbos in that instance, right? In the case of the Rashba, that this was a renegade Jew who's trying to lure this young woman away from Judaism. So we're talking about, not keeping Shabbos or any other law, hitherto. So that's a serious thing. That becomes, spiritual life and death. That's a different story, right? Here it's just, someone says, I'm making a party this Shabbos in my house, and I'm taking you from your place. You're coming to party with me and my friends over here, just this one time, and to transgress probably biblical law of Shabbos, not, but rabbinic law maybe. Lily?
Yeah, did you bring this all up? I must have missed something. Did you bring all this Talmudic stuff up because of Miriam's Lashon Hara and the spies Lashon Hara?
We're going to go on tour together because that's where we're segueing right now into. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. So let's go back to the story of Miriam and the spies and the ills of Lashon Hara. So we asked, why does Miriam suffer in being juxtaposed to the spies, right? Tarnishing her reputation. And as in Torah, there's a tarnish over here because she is next to the spies, right? And especially because, as we explained, even appearance of impropriety is wrong from a Jewish perspective, right? So based on what our discussion that we just had, that it's permissible to commit a minor offense in order to save someone from a more severe offense. So generally, we got to be careful of people's reputation, and of Miriam all the more so, right? Torah shouldn't juxtapose that. We should think that maybe she's got some similarity to, how, bad the Lashon Hara was. The very fact, that she would be next to the spies. Absolutely. But here, comparing Miriam to the spies is not for our information, but it's for the purpose of trying to prevent the spies from sinning. We're supposed to see this story that Moshe wrote down immediately after sending the spies immediately before sending the spies. He wrote down this story of Miriam. Why? That they should get the point. So Moshe is, so to speak, committing a minor offense that Miriam's reputation could be in question. Could be. Doesn't have to be, right? It could be in question, right? Why? To protect the spies from a much greater sin, slandering the Holy Land. And especially according to the second explanation of Tosfos. What was the second explanation of Tosfos? It fits in really much more perfectly. When a person did the act of the sin, then the consequence of the sin you can't save them from, right? You can't transgress in order to save the consequence of sin. But the spies didn't have a consequence of sin yet. They didn't go yet into the land. They were men of stature. They were men of reputation. So in order to make sure that they should not fall short of their mission, Moshe Rabbeinu writes this story down, teaches the Jewish people, because that's what he did, right? He taught Torah to them. Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher, he taught them the story, what happened, right? So imagine, not only that, how many people knew about the story until it was taught to them by Moshe Rabbeinu, because now it's part of the Torah. Think about it, right? People didn't even know about it. Now they know about it. And he does that to his sister, which he has God says about him, he's the most humble person on the face of the earth, right? So he's not doing it with any malice over here. He's doing it as, messenger of God. Why? Because now he's going to send the spies. But this is before there was any consequence of sin. They didn't act yet, and didn't have the act of sin. So therefore he needs to forewarn them to make sure that they come through. As the Rabbi explains. Text number 11 here. This explains how the Torah, by juxtaposing these two passages, could put Miriam in a position where one might suspect that her deeds were somehow comparable to those of the spies. The spies ought to have taken heed from the story and taken care not to commit their sin to begin with. This is reflected in Rashi's choice of words. They did not learn their lesson. The point of sharing the lesson was to save someone else from sinning and to steer them in the right direction. So what is Torah teaching us over here? teaching us an amazing lesson. Sometimes we need to make a small moral sacrifice to put someone, maybe their reputation on the line, that people might think something that is more ill of them than what is in fact, right? In order that you can save somebody else, that they shouldn't do the same thing. So sometimes we need to put ourselves in a spiritual place that is not the safest, not the holiest, not the best place to be. Why? Because I got to be there for someone else. I have to be there to help them. And in a sense, this is, what I can't say that for myself living in Montreal, but many of the shluchim who will live, whether it's in Alaska, whether it's in, Thailand, they don't have beautiful Jewish communities. They don't have beautiful, an oasis, a refuge of beautiful place to live. But spiritually, in a sense, they're giving up a spiritual oasis that they could be living in, where it could be better for their children because they have better schooling. It could be better for their children where they have friends that are, observant.
Real friends.
Real friends.
Real friends. Not ones online.
All right, not ones online, right? Not virtual friends. So many religious Jews say, you can't go out of the cocoon of living in a safe environment and go out into these godforsaken places. What it's going to be with you, what's going to be with your children, even more so. So that's the question. Do you put yourself in a compromised spiritual place in order for the benefit of another Jew, to bring them out of, God forbid, a place that is truly, a bad place, and to bring them into a good space? So this is the message over here. Sometimes we need to put ourselves in that kind of position that we can save another Jew and bring them closer. And the truth is, as this following text indicates, when it comes to your fellow Jew, when you understand that inasmuch as one Jew bears responsibility for another Jew, including the one committing sin, the one committing a sin, this wouldn't be considered sinning to save your fellow, but sinning to save yourself. So you're not sinning to save your fellow, because when you really feel that your fellow Jew is a part of you and you're a part of them, then really what you're doing is saving yourself. And this is what we need to sometimes do, put ourselves out of the comfort zone that we might have in, the cocoon of a Jewish community, or sometimes it's even the comfort of your own home and your own friends that are, the same mind, of the same, mindedness of Torah observance and committed to Jewish life and so on. And put yourself in a place. Now, you can't put yourself, in a place that's completely destructive, right? But you can put yourself in a place where maybe it's not such a spiritual oasis, a refuge, and why? For the betterment of your fellow Jew. And when you feel that that fellow Jew is really a part of you, then you'll be able to do that with great vigor and commitment, because it's not saving that sinning Jew in a sense, it's saving you. Because if I'm me and you are you, then I'm not me and you're not you. But if I am you and you are me, then I am me and you are you, because we are connected. And when we have that sense of being truly connected, then we will be able to put ourselves into compromising, compromising to, not watering down Judaism. That's not what it means over here. Doesn't mean I'm going to eat less kosher because that way I can maybe, help someone else to eat kosher. You don't have to compromise your standard of kosher, right? But, sometimes you need to compromise your standard of who you let in your home and who are your friends, with our kids growing up and the kind of people that we had in the home. Sometimes they weren't the most, savory and wonderful, beautiful people, and sometimes the things they would say, and the kind of ways that they spoke. Sometimes, inside we would cringe because, this is not healthy stuff for, a 10-year-old to hear, right? And that's a compromise. If you only had real, holy rollers at your home, you wouldn't have to worry about that, right? But that's the point over here, is that, if we feel truly connected. So a minor transgression, what's a minor transgression? Not a transgression that means you're watering down your commitment, but sometimes you put yourself in a position like, the people that you have at your table and so on. Now, that being said, if something is said, obviously there's ways and means in how you can speak and try to, upgrade the conversation, which is obviously what you should do in any case. Instead of bringing, ourselves down to them, we try to bring them up to us, where we're at. So this is the idea that we learned from this week's Parsha. Any questions? Any comments?
Yes. Do you mind if I leave? I want to listen to Rabbi Mendy. He's going to talk about the emissaries from Kyoto, Japan. So I'm going to go hear about the Chabad in Japan. Okay.
You got 2 minutes to go. So 2 minutes of any questions. If not, then everybody go to Rabbi Mendy on his Zoom, please. Absolutely. Everybody needs to go there.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Was when Miriam slandered Moses, wasn't it just to Moses and Aaron?
Yes.
It was private. Yet when the spies came back, they didn't privately slander the land. They did it in front of the whole people. So wasn't that the difference?
We said that at the beginning of the class. Exactly. That was our question. How could you make them juxtaposed to one another when they are worlds apart, the kind of slander? And therefore, it may suggest, that was our whole question, right? That was the whole basis of the question.
No, but what I'm asking, though, is if the spies, you said that the spies learned their lesson.
No, it was in order that they should. They didn't learn.
What if they slandered the land just to Moses, as Miriam did? I mean, was Miriam punished?
But they didn't. They didn't. What if? What if? And a good question, what if? But it's not a question, right? I mean,
it's called Socratic teaching. That's how they teach law, Socratic teaching. They change the fact pattern because that's really what they do in Torah study. That's why you have several sides.
Okay, that's what in a halachic question, but that's not what the storyline is. In a halacha, so the Talmud will ask in various scenarios, yes, but that's not what the storyline is. Ahuva, sorry.
I was just guessing that if they had only reported to Moses and not to everyone, the punishment may not have been as severe as it was.
Totally. Of course. Then the Jews wouldn't have said that. Let's go back to Egypt, right? Absolutely, right. But the whole point is that the entire nation, as a result of this, had lack of faith, right? All right. Okay, it's 8 o'clock and you have to leave. Let's go to Rabbi Mendy. All right, folks. Thank you. A good tavoch. Be well. And
Thank you, Rabbi.
Stokovs and the Shama should go from strength to strength.
Thank you, Rabbi. Bye.
And thank you. And so should my Mechutin, Rabbi Katzen, his neshama should go from strength to strength. All the best, everybody. Thank you.
Amen.
Well.